It's time to talk about Tommy. I feel like it was just yesterday I was shouting from the rooftops that I hated Tommy Muldoon to death and wanted nothing to do with him. And every part of that sentence is still true. Tommy Muldoon, like many Guardians, has a terribly inefficient stat line with 3-2 in his Mythos stats and a 3 in book for no reason. He's actually better at using it to flex than most characters are, but like most Guardians, I think that if you're trying to flex, it actually ends up being a worse deck than if you build as a fighter. And as in this tier list and in this series, I talk about trying to optimize characters and what they're best as, I'm not going to talk about Flex Tommy. I'm going to be talking about Tommy Muldoon as a fighter because I think that's the best he can be. If you heard me talk about Roland, you've heard my exact opinion on this stat line because it's the same stat line. There is no difference. And if you didn't, 2 foot's really bad. You're basically always going to fail. 3 heads, pretty all right if you can use some stuff to buff it up, but it's not great for beating Mythos cards, and the fact that Take the Initiative, the main Guardian skill for beating Mythos cards, doesn't work on Frozen in Fear, which is a head test, 3 to be precise, is really clear anti-synergy that makes 3 head actually more of a problem than you might think it would be. If you're fighting with 4 fists, that's perfectly doable. Guardians have no problem doing that, but 3 book is completely useless, and God, you wish those stats went into the side for Mythos defense instead. Now, getting to the ability for Tommy, it's a sick ability. Reaction: when an asset you control is defeated, gain X resources, where X is the total amount of damage and horror on that asset. Shuffle that asset back into your deck. When I said sick, I meant that it disgusts me because I don't understand why you would want this. Personally, I don't want my assets to die. And when my assets do die, I don't want them to make my deck force me to redraw them again since apparently they were dying the first time. And if I've already used them as soak, surely I don't need the soak a second time. This is economy later, and it's negative draw. That's the 2 effects that this gives you. There's only so many times you need a teddy bear to die to keep you alive. Using this for infinite soak is neat, but it's just worse than the way that Yorick does a similar thing. Like, tremendously worse. Miles and miles worse than the way Yorick does a similar thing. But it does give you essentially unlimited soak. You don't really need that. There's a high enough density of soak that you can just use meat grinder allies and let them die and get new ones. But there is the temptation of, if you're gaining resources from this, you can look at cards like Cherished Keepsake in A New Light, where it's just heal 2 horror, gain 2 resources. It's just a weird 2-cost event that has the requirement of you not using your accessory slot. So it's not a bad ability. But a lot of people look at this and they see a dream that is just very, very unreal and not really possible. Speaking of unreal and impossible dreams, before you move on to his card pool or anything else, when you see this, you might think immediately of the Starred Hero, the one from Return to, that gives all of your assets +1 to any soak they had. So suddenly your guard dog level 2 is a 5/3. He's like walking into the scenario with as much health as Charlie Kane has, right? The guard dog is beefy as hell. And the problem with stuff like that is Rookie Mistake. We have to talk about Tommy's signature weakness. Rookie Mistake says, discard each asset you control with damage or horror on it. If no assets are discarded by this effect, shuffle it back into your deck. So the issue is, if you want to like run the Star and a bunch of allies and like be the Thorns tank, if you have a bunch of dudes with damage on them already, then you're just at risk of losing your entire board to Rookie Mistake, which, by the way, discards them. It does not defeat them. Those are different terms. So you don't even get the resources, you don't get to shuffle them back, they're just gone. So you have to make a deck that's going to work as though your next draw was Rookie Mistake every turn of the game. Otherwise, you're vulnerable to drawing Rookie Mistake and basically failing as a deck, just throwing out 7 to 12 resources instantly because you had multiple allies get eaten by it. And the idea of the Star Tarot Tank Tommy falls apart. And before I actually go on from that, I want to talk about Mega Becky decks. Mega Becky decks are decks that just like try to use Becky because you can turn the resources that Tommy gets into ammo on Becky instead, and then it deals like +2 for +1 fine numbers. That's just the attack on Time Worn brand but with an ammo. But you have infinite ammo because you're letting guys die, so this is a way to facilitate just putting all of your upgrade cards on one gun and making Exodia. And that's a neat concept. And I want to say very clearly, I have playtested Tommy in 2 different standalogs aside of like a Mandy or a Harvey with no Stone 5, where I immediately like used the ability, ripped out the signature weakness with like a 1 damage on a Cherished Keepsake or something, and also did it to get Becky out immediately. And then I playtested the scenario with Tommy as my fighter, essentially with no weakness, and starting with Becky, and I found that he was an unimpressive, unexceptional fighter with a ton of setup time, whose economy really struggled because until I let my guys die, his ability did literally nothing, meaning his setup phase is really brutal. Of course, in a real campaign, that's not going to happen. You have to play around Rookie Mistake every turn of the game. You aren't going to draw a Becky guaranteed, but if you did, and you fully assembled a Mega Becky, you would come to the realization that it was not meaningfully better than just using any normal high-end Guardian weapon, and in fact was very frequently worse, and you would just be better off. Like, I had situations when I was playtesting Mega Becky where it's like, I really wish I was running extra ammo because none of these guys are gonna die anytime soon. It's genuinely a problem. So Tommy's signature promises a deck concept that doesn't work and is otherwise a mediocre backup weapon. His signature weakness cripples his core concept, and his star allows you to use the damage on yourself, which, considering you're killing your allies as fast as possible to play around Rookie Mistake, there's not going to be much. It basically, the first time you move your in the thick of it trauma to your assets, and other than that, that's it. It's not going to be a very good star. As for his deck building, I've alluded to it, I haven't mentioned it. He's Guardian 0 to 5, Survivor 0 to 2. He's a blue character with red as his splash color, and that's actually a really strong card pool. It's the best part about Tommy by far, and it allows a lot of the stuff where you look at like Flex Tommy to feel actually viable. And I think Flex Tommy probably would get out of F tier. I think it would be like in the same tier, not that far behind Fighter Tommy. Coming over to what I've got cooked up as my best version of Tommy, it is unfortunately Blessed Tommy. The idea being that since you need to throw your enemies in the meat grinder pretty quickly, Spirit of Humanity lets you add 2 blesses to the bag to get it done quicker. Ancestral Token is Soak that you can easily toss. If you need to, you really shouldn't though. And more importantly, a great way of adding blesses to the bag. And then Favor of the Sun plus Ancient Covenant is how you're going to handle Mythos Resilience, how you're going to deal with these bad Mythos stats, although you can also use it to guarantee a big swing with multiple charges on a Runic Axe. The 1 Charisma is actually one of the last things you need to get in this deck, because again, you're trying to have your allies die pretty quickly. You're not looking to get multiple allies out at once, and really you would only use the Charisma at the very end. Like once you've seen Rookie Mistake, you're like, okay, cool, I can put out the second beat comp. On the whole, this is just a very high draw deck looking to assemble the pieces needed to let Ancient Covenant protect you while killing with Runic Axe and rotating the ally slot for value. I don't think this is meaningfully better than just a straight up blue and red Fighter Tommy, but it is something unique to Tommy that I wanted to show off, and in a Blessed team, this character would be much more appreciated than a standard Fighter Tommy, so it's an interesting niche that he can fill. I also wanted to show off specifically Ancient Covenant to handle his bad Mythos stats, because he is, I think, the only Guardian that gets access to that specific combo, and it's very, very good for literally any Guardian, but he's the only one with it, so he's the one that needs to be showing it off. I like this build. It is hot garbage. This is like the most enticing pile of shit deck I've ever seen. And I'm being overly harsh to it. It's not bad. You will absolutely get through a campaign with this. But the promise is so much better than the reality of playing this. This is just a dude with Runic Axe whose allies keep dying and getting replaced for no reason. Like, you can't Runic Axe in Yorick, but the whole Ancient Covenant Yorick thing is much better. Testless damage with guard dogs is done better in Yorick. Yorick being Tommy's inverse makes you like really want to compare them. And Tommy's so much worse. They're basically at exact opposite places in the tier list. But Tommy will be fine. Unlike Roland, I don't expect him to die, ever. He's not invincible like Yorick. He's not as good at beating the Mythos bag as Yorick, or just not caring what happens like Yorick. But he is resilient enough that I don't expect him to die. He's got some uniquely strong things. He can help a Blessed team a ton. He can draw through a deck really quickly if he puts his mind to it. And I don't think I hate Tommy anymore. I think it's finally settled in me that like Tommy can't do the thing you want to do. You can't just make the dozens of allies Tommy deck. I would love to play Tommy in the petting zoo, but unfortunately, that's not a thing. Instead, you have to play a Leo style meat grinder. And I think it's definitively worse than the way Leo plays the same archetype, the way Yorick plays the same archetype. But I think it comes out roughly on par with the Roland. That even though Roland is decidedly more frail and can't help a Blessed team in the same way, Roland has better support cards in his archetype. He's able to fit in things like Strong Armed and Deep Knowledge and Crack the Case. He's able to build a deck that probably won't ever die instead of just never dies like Tommy does. I think Roland has very different and more pronounced weaknesses, but he also has very different and more pronounced strengths than Tommy does. And even if you really wanted a fighter for a Blessed team, you don't have to pick Tommy. Because sure, Tommy has a lot of things about him specifically that do well in Blessed team, but you can just slap Ancestral Token in any high draw Guardian deck, and they will do more than their share to put Blesses in the bag. So even though this is a niche, it's not a niche because Tommy's the guardian that enables blesses. If that went to anyone, it would go to Sister Mary, but it's all guardians now. No, the niche is that Tommy's the guardian that benefits from blesses. Coming back to the tier list, right now I have Tommy right next to Roland. It's the start of characters that are consistently and really effectively performing their role, that they're going to be completely fine in the campaign sense. Whereas Roland, you can be sketchy about horror damage, they might actually be a problem. Tommy should be able to get you through as your fighter. In a campaign sense, Tommy is not weak. Tommy will do his job. But relative to other investigators, I cannot give you reasons to play Tommy. There are absolutely sick and cool and interesting Tommy builds. If you want to vibe out with a reliable lantern and investigate at really high numbers in a guardian, Tommy's the only guy getting to do that. But if we're just talking about characters as though they are the most efficient and powerful version of themselves, we're talking about a pretty boring fighter Tommy that's just using his red cards to be better, or a blessed Tommy that I just showed you. And I don't really need to show you the level 0 decks, because if you've seen a level 0 guardian deck, you've seen a level 0 Tommy. It's the same shit. So even though I have Tommy near the bottom of D tier, I've described him as weak, it's worth noting this is relative to other investigators. Even though I think he's one of the worst investigators. What do we have him at? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Maybe we have him as the 10th worst investigator. That's right around the bottom 6th mark, very low in our D tier for weak. But this is all relative to other investigators, and other investigators are like fucking Rex Murphy. They're insane. Even only going up a couple of tiers, we got like Diana Stanley and Kaimati and Nat Show. Being bad relatively doesn't mean a character can't win the campaign. There are just so many incredibly strong characters in the game that being able to beat a campaign does not mean that you are a good investigator in a relative sense. And that's very much why Tommy is in weak. I just think everyone above him has far more going on for them, and that the unique things to Tommy are not uniquely strong, and a lot of what is unique to Tommy is uniquely frustrating and weak. Anyways, that'll be all for now. I've been rather Incoherent, and this has been your daily dose of me explaining why bad investigators are just that. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please do the YouTube algorithm dance. I really appreciate it. And a massive shout out to my supporters over on Patreon who keep this channel running. I'll see you in the next one.